In the mid-18th century, amidst palace coups and European wars, a figure suddenly emerged on the political stage, shaking the foundations of the Russian Empire. Unknown, without name or origin, she boldly declared herself Elizabeth, daughter of the late Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, and the legitimate heir to the Russian throne. This desperate adventuress, later known as Princess Tarakanova, quickly gained support among those discontented with Catherine the Great's regime, managing to incite rebellion and even secure the patronage of European monarchs. She became the embodiment of a grand international intrigue, a symbol of hope for some and a mortal threat to others. Her triumphant, albeit brief ascent ended in the waters of the Adriatic, where she was cunningly captured and brought to Russia. The self-proclaimed princess spent her last days in the damp casemates of the Peter and Paul fortress, where, according to popular legend, she perished during a grand flood, drowning in her cell. However, historical documents ruthlessly dispel this dramatic myth. In reality, this woman, whose true name and origin remain debated, died of consumption or tuberculosis, quietly fading away in captivity in December 1775. Her death in December 1775, a quiet demise in the damp confines of the Peter and Paul fortress, marked the end of the woman's story, but only deepened the veil of mystery surrounding her true identity. Before becoming Princess Tarakanova, the audacious claimant to the Russian throne, she was someone else. And it is precisely in this, in her nebulous, constantly changing past, that the roots of the phenomenon that challenged one of Europe's most powerful monarchies lie. This woman's biography is not a biography in the usual sense, but a kaleidoscope of names, guises, and locations. She changed them like gloves, disappearing into European capitals and reappearing under a new guise, now an Arab princess, now a baroness, now the daughter of a German notary, or even a mysterious countess. No one knew her true origin, and perhaps she herself had long forgotten it. This life of constant flight, where each new name became not just a cover, but a new facet of her own, ever-changing personality, was her only reality. Such forced homelessness left no room for roots, for genuine belonging. She lacked a firm foundation, forced to constantly rebuild herself out of thin air, out of others' expectations. It was in this homelessness, in the endless kaleidoscope of impostures, in the continuous game with others' fates, that the audacious idea was born that one day brought her onto the world stage. The European 18th century was fertile ground for such adventures. Courts seethed with intrigue, political émigrés sought pretexts for returning home, and opportunists eager for easy money skillfully played on others' ambitions. In this chaotic environment, where deception and reality often intertwined, not just an impostor but a true master of transformation emerged, capable of convincing even the most seasoned players of her truth. She absorbed languages, manners, and knowledge of court etiquette, accumulating an arsenal that would later allow her to imitate royal grandeur. Her path to the crown was not direct. It wound through dozens of minor scams, through romances with wealthy patrons, through the constant need to survive, relying solely on her own wit and charm. Each successful mystification, each deceived creditor, each enchanted admirer strengthened her belief in her own talent for manipulation. This was a peculiar training ground where she honed the skills that ultimately led her to the most dangerous and ambitious project of her life. The point of no return was crossed when her extraordinary talent for mystification met the political ambitions of those who saw in her not just another adventuress, but a potential instrument for overthrowing Catherine the Great. This was no longer just deception for profit. It was a high-stakes game where crowns and the fates of empires were on the line. From petty fraud to grand political intrigue, such was the path of this woman who, possessing nothing but her audacity and ability to transform, dared to challenge history itself. The European 18th century did not merely facilitate the appearance of such adventures. it literally generated them. It was a time of radical change, when old monarchies were shaken by internal contradictions and external conflicts. Wars of succession, diplomatic intrigues, and territorial claims redrew the map of the continent with startling regularity. England and France vied for global dominance, Prussia rapidly gained strength, and the Russian Empire, led by ambitious rulers, sought to secure a worthy place among the great powers. Against this backdrop, where the legitimacy of power was often determined less by blood than by force of arms and political manipulation, any deviation from the norm, any unexpected figure, could become a tool in the hands of those who craved a redistribution of power. Europe's economic life also buzzed with activity. Trade routes expanded, cities grew, and new financial instruments emerged, but with them, opportunities for fraud multiplied. The lack of uniform standards, the weakness of legal systems, and a general naivete regarding financial operations created an ideal environment for those skilled in exploiting others' greed and gullibility. Loans were granted on a handshake, reputation meant more than actual wealth, and rumors spread faster than official news. In such conditions, where wealth could be both instantly acquired and irretrievably lost, adventurers of all kinds found fertile ground for their schemes. Despite outward stability, the social structure was cracking at the seams. Enlightenment ideas of equality and liberty, albeit slowly, permeated the minds of educated strata, undermining the absolute power of monarchs and aristocracy. Simultaneously, the majority of the population lived in poverty, oppressed by feudal remnants and the arbitrary rule of local authorities. Discontent brewed, and any spark could ignite a blaze. In this unstable environment, where every third court was a hotbed of political émigrés, conspirators, and mere thrill-seekers, impostors found not only listeners but also potential supporters. People yearned to believe in a miracle, in unexpected salvation, in the return of a legitimate monarch who would restore justice. Nor should we forget the state of the information landscape. Newspapers were only just beginning to develop, and rumors and gossip remained the primary source of news. The absence of fast and reliable means of communication made fact-checking almost impossible. Anyone with sufficient charisma, acting talent, and persuasive ability could pass themselves off as anyone traveling from one capital to another. European courts, often isolated and absorbed in their own intrigues, were surprisingly trusting of new faces, especially if they came with recommendations or possessed an exotic origin. This cocktail of political instability, economic uncertainty, and social naivete created the perfect storm in which the story of the impostor, known as Princess Tarakanova, could not only be born but also gain incredible momentum. In this tumultuous environment, where rumors replaced news and legitimacy was merely a matter of persuasion, the woman we know as Princess Tarakanova began her great game. Her first notable appearance was recorded in Hamburg in 1770. Here, she presented herself as the Princess of Vladimir, a title that sounded exotic and promising enough to attract attention. This was a series of minor but telling scams, where her main weapon, incredible charm and the ability to create illusions, worked flawlessly. She borrowed money from local merchants and nobles, promising fabulous returns or lucrative investments in non-existent ventures. Her legend was intentionally vague but convincing enough for those craving easy money or simply charmed by her manners and mysterious origin. She skillfully exploited gullibility and ambition, leaving behind only a trail of unpaid bills and disillusioned creditors. Her journey continued through London and Paris. In each new city, she changed not only her name, but also meticulously constructed a new biography, which had to be even more plausible and impressive. By 1772, she was calling herself Baroness Frank and then Countess Pinneberg. These new identities allowed her not only to successfully evade creditors, but also to expand her circle of victims, raising the stakes. It was in Paris in that same year of 1772 that a meeting occurred that changed the trajectory of her adventures. She met Michał Kazimierz Ogiński, a powerful Polish magnate and Grand Hetman of Lithuania. For him, she played a new, far more ambitious role, presenting herself not merely as an aristocrat, but as the daughter of the late Empress Elizabeth Petrovna. She promised Ogiński support in his struggle for the Polish throne if he, in turn, provided her with significant financial and political assistance. This was no longer merely deception for money, it was an attempt to weave herself into the fabric of European politics, using others' ambitions as a springboard for her own, far grander goals. With each new city, each new name, her legend became more sophisticated and her goals more audacious. From minor financial schemes, she transitioned to large-scale political intrigues. By 1773, while in Frankfurt and then Venice, she openly called herself Elizabeth, daughter of Empress Elizabeth Petrovna, and the legitimate heir to the Russian throne. This was the culminating moment of her preparation for the Great Game. She wasn't merely imitating an aristocrat, she was laying claim to one of Europe's most powerful thrones, attracting the attention not only of adventurers, but also serious political players who saw in her a potential threat, or conversely, a valuable ally against Catherine the Great. Her ability to maintain this complex, constantly evolving legend for several years, convincing a wide range of people, from petty swindlers to high-ranking nobles and even potential monarchs, demonstrated not just a talent for deception, but unique psychological insight, acting prowess, and an iron will. She learned not only to speak, but to be whom she portrayed, blurring the lines between reality and fiction until she herself believed her own lies, making them even more convincing to those around her. To make others believe her incredible legend, the impostor, later known as Princess Tarakanova, employed a carefully honed arsenal of psychological tactics and manipulative techniques. Her primary weapon was extraordinary charisma, a rare blend of charm, confidence, and mystery that drew people in like a magnet. She could instantly assess an interlocutor, adapting her communication style, tone of voice, and even gestures to create a sense of deep personal connection. In her presence, people felt special, chosen, privy to some great secret. This was acting of the highest caliber, where every word, every glance, was part of a grand performance. She masterfully played on the basest human instincts, greed, vanity, the desire for easy gain, and social advancement. Promises of fabulous profits from non-existent ventures, lucrative investments, or support on the path to power were her signature move. To merchants, she painted pictures of untold riches, to impoverished nobles, the return of past glory, to political émigrés, a chance for revenge. She didn't just ask for money or support, she offered a chance, an investment in a future where every ruble invested or service rendered would yield a 100-fold return. This strategy worked flawlessly because people heard not what she said, but what they wanted to hear themselves. Creating a buzz around her own person was another of her masterful techniques. She did not strive for complete transparency. On the contrary, her legend always remained intentionally vague, full of innuendo and meaningful hints. This spawned rumors, speculation, and excitement that spread faster than any official communication. She appeared and disappeared suddenly, leaving a trail of intrigue and ambiguity, which only enhanced her mystical image. She skillfully used her exotic origin or high-ranking connections, real or imagined, to attract attention. The more questions she left unanswered, the stronger people's desire to fill those gaps with their own imagination, thereby solidifying her image. Attracting high-ranking or influential figures who could be called her experts or patrons was a critically important element of her strategy. She wasn't just seeking money, she sought legitimacy. by drawing prominent aristocrats, disgraced politicians, or even military figures close to her, she not only received financial aid, but also lent weight to her story. These individuals, whether they believed in her or decided to use her for their own purposes, unwittingly became her advertising agents, spreading her legend within their circles and giving it an air of plausibility. To them, she was not merely an adventuress, but a potential key to power, a way to influence European politics. Finally, her astonishing capacity for adaptation. Every setback, every exposed deception did not break her but became a lesson. She instantly changed her name, biography, and place of residence, adjusting to new circumstances. If one legend stopped working, she immediately created a new, even more sophisticated one. She absorbed information about people, places, and the political climate, using this knowledge to fine-tune her roles. This was not just a game, but a continuous process of learning and evolution, where each new experience made her an even more dangerous and convincing master of transformation. Her life was a constant experiment in human gullibility, and she herself was a living embodiment of the art of manipulation. However, no matter her talent for manipulation, the impostor's great game was only possible thanks to those who stood behind her, and those who desperately tried to stop her. Her appearance on the European stage was not a solo show, but part of a complex, multi-layered drama where each character pursued their own, often hidden, interests. Behind the so-called Princess Tarakanova loomed the shadows of powerful patrons and beneficiaries who saw her as an ideal instrument for achieving their goals. Chief among these were the Polish Confederates, desperately fighting against Russian influence in their homeland and personally against Catherine the Great. After the defeat of the Bar Confederation in 1772, many Polish aristocrats and military figures found themselves in exile, eager for revenge. They sought any opportunity to weaken the Russian Empire, and the appearance of a mysterious princess claiming the Russian throne was a true godsend for them. They were ready not only to finance her, but also to lend political weight to her claims, spreading rumors and attracting supporters. For figures like the aforementioned Michał Kazimierz Ogiński, she was not just a woman, but a symbol of hope, a living banner in the struggle for Poland's independence. But not only Poles saw potential in her. European courts, especially those competing with Russia, France, and the Ottoman Empire, closely followed this intrigue. They were in no hurry to openly support the impostor, but they were ready to use her as leverage, as a destabilizing factor against their geopolitical adversary. Her very existence was beneficial, creating tension and diverting Catherine's attention from foreign policy matters. Some European adventurers and swindlers, driven by greed or vanity, also joined her entourage, hoping to profit from her supposed rise. On the other hand, this grand intrigue was opposed by a figure whose power and determination were unprecedented, Empress Catherine the Great. For her, the impostor's appearance was not merely an annoying incident, but a direct threat to the legitimacy of her rule and the stability of the empire. Catherine, who herself came to power through a palace coup, perfectly understood how fragile monarchical power could be, and how easily doubts could be sown in the minds of her subjects. Emelyan Pugachev's rebellion, raging at the same time, only intensified her fears. Anyone who claimed the throne, whether a real or fictional heir, became a mortal enemy, threatening the entire system. Therefore, Catherine spared no effort or expense to track down and neutralize this audacious claimant, seeing in her not just an adventuress, but a dangerous political symbol. She deployed the full might of her diplomatic and intelligence apparatus to put an end to this dangerous game. Catherine the Great immediately activated her counterintelligence machinery. Her goal was clear: to stop the impostor at all costs before she could ignite a real fire in the heart of Europe. The Empress knew that direct confrontation might only enhance the aura of martyrdom around a figure who had already caused so much commotion. Therefore, a path of subtle but ruthless capture operation was chosen, resembling a spy thriller. At the head of this mission stood a man whose name was synonymous with ruthless efficiency and devotion to the throne, Count Alexei Orlov, a hero of the Battle of Chesma, commander of the Russian squadron in the Mediterranean. He possessed not only military might, but also a sharp mind, and more importantly in this game, exceptional charm. Orlov received a personal order from the Empress to track down and deliver the dangerous claimant to Russia, using any available means. And he undertook the task with his characteristic tenacity, turning the hunt for the impostor into a meticulously planned spectacle of deception. The impostor's path to downfall began in Livorno, an Italian port city, where she, continuing her grand game, conducted negotiations with numerous patrons and supporters. She felt safe, surrounded by the illusion of her own power and influence. It was here, in 1774, that her fate collided with Orlov's calculated plan. The Russian count, perfectly aware of her weaknesses, vanity, and a craving for recognition, launched a masterful psychological attack. He did not rush to arrest her. Instead, he enacted a romantic drama, employing all his masculine charm and reputation as an influential courtier. Orlov, a prominent and charismatic naval commander, feigned passionate love, convincing her of his readiness not only to support her claims to the Russian throne, but also to marry her, thereby legitimizing her status in the eyes of the European elite. The impostor, accustomed to easy victories over men and blinded by the prospect of such an influential alliance, let down her guard. She believed in the sincerity of his feelings and, more importantly, in the potential benefits this unexpected romance promised. This was her fatal, last mistake. Orlov lured her onto his squadron under the pretext of showing her the ships or hosting a grand dinner in her honor. He arranged a lavish reception where she was the center of attention, surrounded by honor and flattery. On that day, November 13, 1774, when she stepped onto the deck of the Russian frigate St. Nicholas, the steel jaws of the trap instantly closed around her. The deception was revealed in an instant. Her entire entourage, including her Polish supporters, was arrested, and she herself became a prisoner aboard the ship that was to deliver her directly to the heart of the Russian Empire. The journey to St. Petersburg was long, humiliating, and agonizing. From Livorno, she was brought by sea to Russia, bypassing all European ports where a diplomatic scandal or an attempt at liberation might have erupted. She was no longer a free woman, changing names and guises, playing with others' fates. Now she was a captive whose image was fixed and whose fate was predetermined. Upon arrival in Kronstadt and then in the capital, she was immediately imprisoned in the Peter and Paul Fortress, the main prison of the Russian Empire, a place from which few emerged free. There, in the damp casemates of the Alexeyevsky Ravelin, her triumphant, albeit brief ascent to the political arena of Europe finally ended. A master of transformation, a genius of manipulation, she found herself powerless before the cold calculation and ruthless will of Catherine the Great. The era of her daring adventures came to an end, giving way to a tragic denouement, which we already know, but whose details still shock with their mercilessness. Her arrest and subsequent death in the Peter and Paul Fortress were not merely the end of a personal drama, but also a trigger for a series of consequences that echoed across European capitals. First and foremost, her disappearance was followed by financial ruin for hundreds of European merchants, nobles, and bankers who had lent her enormous sums of money under promises of fabulous interest or future political gains. These investments, based on faith in her royal origin, turned out to be nothing but pure loss. The Russian crown, of course, recognized no obligations for these debts, categorically refusing to repay them. For many, this meant bankruptcy, loss of reputation, and the collapse of hopes for easy money. Trust in any exotic projects, especially those related to Russia, was undermined for many years. The fate of her immediate supporters was even more tragic. Those Polish Confederates who were arrested with her aboard the Russian frigate were brought to Russia and imprisoned. Some of them, like Colonel Dombrowski, spent years in confinement, while others were exiled or died in captivity. Their hopes for the revival of Polish statehood through the support of a supposed heiress completely collapsed, and the Bar Confederation itself, already weakened, suffered another devastating blow. For Catherine the Great, the successful conclusion of this operation was an undeniable triumph. She not only eliminated a direct threat to her legitimacy, but also sent a clear signal to all potential impostors and their patrons. The Russian Empire possessed not only military might, but also a sophisticated intelligence apparatus capable of reaching an enemy anywhere in Europe. This episode strengthened her authority on the international stage, demonstrating the resolve and effectiveness of her rule. European courts, which had previously observed the intrigue cautiously, now had to acknowledge Russia's strength and influence. However, victory did not come free. The operation to capture the impostor itself, including the maintenance of Count Orlov's squadron in the Mediterranean, the bribing of agents, diplomatic expenses, and the transport of the prisoner, required significant financial outlay. Although specific figures remain a subject of historical debate, it is clear that enormous state funds were spent on capturing and neutralizing this adventuress. These expenses, coupled with the ongoing Russo-Turkish War and the suppression of Pugachev's rebellion, placed an additional burden on the imperial treasury. Ultimately, the story of Princess Tarakanova, despite its seeming insignificance on the scale of the empire, played the role of a catalyst, accelerating certain processes. It forced the Crown to reconsider its internal security mechanisms and strengthen control over the information sphere. This was a lesson for Catherine about how dangerous rumors could be and how easily they could be manipulated for political purposes. After this incident, the Russian Empire became even more vigilant against any manifestations of imposture and attempts at external interference in its internal affairs, which left its mark on its subsequent foreign and domestic policy. And yet, despite all of Catherine's efforts to bury the truth about the audacious impostor, the story of Princess Tarakanova not only did not disappear, it gained a second, far more powerful life. Not as a chronicle of a real woman quietly fading away in damp casemates, but as a myth that outgrew its creator and overshadowed her true fate. In popular memory, in romantic literature and painting, she appeared not as a cunning adventuress, but as a tragic heroine, a victim of treachery and injustice, who perished in the waters of a flood like a true martyr. This distortion, this shift from prosaic truth to epic drama, became the most striking paradox of her legacy. The paradox of her enduring echo lies in the fact that a figure whose life was a continuous chain of deceptions became the very foundation for a grand fabrication that proved stronger than facts. A master of transformation whose existence was built on lies, she paradoxically became a symbol of trampled truth for those who yearned to challenge the Empress's power. For artists, poets, and the common people, weary of harsh reality, she became an ideal canvas onto which they could project their own fears and hopes. Her image, devoid of real features, became imbued with a romantic aura of martyrdom, a fight for justice, or at least for personal dignity, in an unequal struggle against a vast empire. Her story, initially just an episode in a power struggle, eventually transformed into something more, a parable about the eternal confrontation between weakness and strength, deception and truth, dreams and harsh reality. She demonstrated how readily public consciousness embraces a vivid emotional story over a complex and less captivating reality. Herein lies a universal lesson: narrative or myth can not only distort history, but also shape it, giving events an entirely different, sometimes far more powerful, resonance. It matters not who she truly was, what matters is who she became in the collective imagination. Princess Tarakanova is not merely the name of a forgotten impostor, but an eternal symbol of how humanity's yearning for miracles, justice, and retribution can rewrite the past. She serves as a reminder that history is not always written in ink on paper, but far more often by feelings and fantasies in the minds of people. Her legend, having survived centuries, proves that sometimes fiction, rich in drama and emotion, turns out to be far more enduring and influential than the most undeniable truth. And in this lies her true immortal greatness, not in the crown she never wore, but in the myth she spawned, which continues to live